Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Proven Ways to Protect Your Data from Hackers. I'm Carol Miller, Group Editor of today's Garden Center. Before we get started, I would like to thank and recognize our sponsor, Epicor. Garden retailers like you are focused on running your businesses and taking care of customers. You don't have the time or resources to make data security a top priority. But unfortunately, that makes independent businesses like yours an opportunity for hackers. Today's panelists will discuss the steps you can take to ensure your business, your data, and your customers are safe. They'll describe measures from simple do-it-yourself tests to hiring a service to find vulnerabilities by trying to hack into your own system. Today we have three panelists. Tom Litchford is Vice President of Retail Technology for the National Retail Federation, and he leads NRF's Technology Leadership Community, including the exclusive invite-only CIO Council and the IT Security Council. He also oversees NRF's Association for Retail Technology Standards. Harry Hartnett has been with Epicor for 20 years. As the Senior Manager of Technical Services, he currently manages technical support, Epicor Eagle Hosting, Epicor Watchdog, and Epicor Secure Data Backup Services. Sam Kirkland is a Strategic Relationship Manager for Epicor, which he joined in May of 2011, which was following a merger with Activant Solutions. In his role as Strategic Relationship Manager, he builds strong programs to drive partner initiatives. So now, without any further ado, let's hear from Tom, Harry, and Sam.
All right, thanks, Carol. This is Tom Litchford with the NRF, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody, wherever you might be located. Let's see if the slides are going to move forward for us here. You know, I wanted to start off with just showing you a slide here when it comes up that talks a little bit about data breaches, and data breaches has obviously been big in the news today, and actually it's been probably a little more disproportionate in the news in terms of retail versus other industries. In fact, somewhat negatively, like retailers don't care about security or retailers aren't taking care of their customer data, which we all know is far from the truth, because that customer data is probably the heart of our business, and we do everything we can to protect it. So what we're trying to show you here is the data or cyber crime as an overall problem is not specific to any one industry. And you can see on this slide, obviously in the most recent news, Premier and Anthem, and what these bad actors are going after. And so it's not just credit cards. In fact, as we secure our payment systems better, and we are getting better at that, what we're actually seeing is these criminal actors moving more to going after what we call PII data, or personally identifiable information. So that's why they're going after the likes of the Anthems and the Premier, where they can get a hold of things like birthdays and security numbers, which they can do a lot more damage with than they can do with just getting a credit card number. The other point I'd like to make too is sometimes we hear, you know, well, we're compliant or we're secure. Well, hopefully this shows you that nobody is secure. In fact, I love this quote: absolute security is only attainable when you're protecting something absolutely worthless. And that's obviously not true. We need to protect our payment data, we need to protect our customer and our employee data, and we're going to do everything we can to do with that. So from a cyber security perspective, we need to be focused on something we'll talk about called enterprise risk management. This next slide is just going to show you a little bit, you know, if the first slide doesn't scare you enough, well, what are some of these guys doing, or how prevalent are they? And again, this doesn't matter what size of an organization you are. And again, my slides are not coming up right, Carol, if you want to look into that. But
okay, I'm going to control the moving forward from here on out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So while there we go. While she brings this up, again, we're dealing with some pretty sophisticated actors out there. And again, when we say sophisticated, this isn't the picture of the 17-year-old hacking away in his bedroom for fun. Predominantly, what's coming after us in retail are folks with PhDs sitting or protected in Russia or Ukraine because we have no legal authority to go after them. And they're hacking away at our systems until they can get in, which then forms the breach, and then they muck around in those systems until they find the gold mine, and then they extract the data and they go to sell it. So with that, Carol, if you could move forward. Again, this slide is just showing you just how prevalent they are within your systems. This slide here, I just really want to call out a couple of points, right? You know, all the hype today is around EMV, and we're going to talk a little about EMV later and what EMV is going to protect or not protect for us. But really what's going to happen is you see, you know, again, you know, in terms of retail, it's not just point of sale that they're going after. And you can see here e-commerce was 54% of the assets targeted, and that's only going to grow as we deploy EMV. So I would urge you to really start making sure we have some strong controls around our e-commerce platforms. And then the other point I wanted to make on this slide was that 71% of the victims don't detect the breaches themselves. I mean, and that's not to say this is bad, but it's to say we've got to get really proactive in terms of our monitoring of our systems so that we can get better at detecting these. But typically in retail, it's usually your bank or the Secret Service that calls you, and that's the first time you know that there's a problem. Moving on the cybercrime slide, here again, I'm going to call out a couple points. Everybody knows the Target breach. The Target really woke everybody up, I think, and then of course 2014 then became the year of the breach. They were just almost falling every week, one after another. And you can see the numbers here. They lost 40 million credit card numbers and 70 million email addresses. But I think, you know, some of the key things on here is you know, the response is, well, we're going to spend $100 million putting EMV in. And I just want to make it clear to you, you know, again, especially the banks would like us to believe that EMV is the panacea here. But had Target had EMV in when their breach occurred, they would have still lost all 40 million credit card numbers. So let's not believe that EMV is the answer to our problems here. The other thing I just wanted to call out is just how inexpensive it is for these bad actors. So the Target malware that was used on their point-of-sale system cost anywhere from $2,500 to $6,500. It is open source, free freeware that you can go to websites and download. And you can become a hacker today. And once they had this software and they were able to get it installed into the Target point-of-sale terminals, what we believe is that they were able to sell then those stolen credit cards for anywhere from $18 to $35, $36. We think of the 40 million, about 1 to 3 million of them were actually used for fraud, and we think the bad actors made somewhere around $54 million. So you can see it's a pretty lucrative business for them. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you one more number here. I wanted to call out, you can obviously see on the wanted poster, this is Eugene Bogashev. Bogashev is wanted by the FBI for $100 million in bank robbery. And it's kind of interesting, right? I said bank robbery, so immediately I'm thinking, oh, Wild Wild West, we come in with the guns blazing and we rob the bank. This gentleman has never set foot in a U.S. bank, yet he has been able to steal about $100 million. And just to take the focus a little bit off of credit cards, because that's what's always in the news, this last number I wanted to give you, $198,234.93, is the amount of money Haysite lost. Haysite is a small plastics manufacturer, I believe, out of Philadelphia. What Bogashev was able to do is use something called Game Over Zeus, which you've probably heard in the news, or something, CryptoLocker is another famous one he's famous for. And he was able to use what we call a phishing email. So he lured an accounts payable person within Haysite to click on a link, and within 24 hours he had the password to their bank account and had routed, again, almost $200,000 through PNC. Their bank was PNC, down to SunTrust in Atlanta. And while that money was at SunTrust, he did what we call a massive denial of service attack on SunTrust to get all their security people interested in the denial of service, and then he exfiltrated the $200,000 across the pond into a bank that we can never track from now. So again, this isn't just about payment guards. This is a problem across all industries, across the entire enterprise, that you have to be aware of what these guys are trying to do. Next slide, please, Carol. So with that, again, just some common sense things that we like to put out, and these I actually came from Sandra Barber, who is the EVP and CIO for Lockheed, and you can imagine if we're worried about credit cards, what Lockheed Martin is trying to protect every day, day in and day out. But the first thing is she likes to talk about is act like a CSI. So one of the things we're trying to teach our member retailers is perimeter defenses no longer work, and we need to be more of what we call an intelligence-driven defense, and we need to be a lot more proactive about monitoring and identifying and then mitigating. 2, build the muscle of a first line of defense. This is absolutely key. Your employees are the first line of defense. Again, that last example I gave you was an employee in AP that clicked on a phishing email. We've got to start training our employees to be much more wary about what they're clicking on, whether in websites or in email. Have an incident response plan. This is critical. Don't wait for it to happen. Assume it's already happened to you, and make sure that you have that response plan in place, and there are ways to build this plan. But it's not just about technology. You're going to need PR people. You're going to need to know which lawyers you want in place, your loss prevention folks. You're going to probably want forensics folks. If it's a credit card breach, obviously then Visa, through their PCI agreement, is going to bring in their own forensics people. So you really don't want this happening to you without knowing or having it pre-planned what you're going to do. Watch your supply chain. We all heard, the way they got into Target was through the HVAC vendor who had legitimate credentials to get into Target systems, and they were able to steal those credentials. Wall off your most critical data. So again, if we know which data we're trying to protect, so obviously my employee data, my customer data, my payment card data, let's wall that off and use techniques that we'll talk about, such as tokenization and encryption to protect it. Share your intelligence. If you come across something that you're not so sure about, share it out. In fact, one of the things NRF has done in the past year or so is we run a threat alert system, and we push out about 12 to 15 alerts per day to our member companies, and member companies are coming back to us, oh, we're seeing this going on, what do you see? And we can push that back out to other members and get that collaboration going on so that they have heads up as to things that are happening. We also have relationships with the Homeland Security and with Secret Service where we can pass information to them and they can come back to us, and then we can forward that back down to our retailers. So again, sharing intelligence is probably one of the easiest things and one of the best things we can do to protect ourselves. And lastly, I know this is probably more toward a larger retailer, but become the hunter. Don't wait for it to happen to you. Let's go figure out what these guys are trying to do, what they're after, and let's try to what we call the kill chain. Let's kill them before they can get to that data that they're after. So with that, next slide, Carol, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Harry.
Well, Tom, thank you. And boy, I met Tom earlier before we got engaged to do our webinar today, and I didn't think Tom was such a scary person, but Tom, you're scaring me now. This is a but the threats are real, just as Tom said. The threats are absolutely real, and the criminals, and they are criminals. You should detest hackers just as much as you detest somebody shoplifting something from your store. And they're criminals just in the same way. That you might have a criminal walk through a suburban subdivision during the day when everybody's at work, and he might go up to each house and he might jiggle the doorknob and say, "Ah, that one has they've got 2 deadbolts and they've got a dog in the yard, and I'm not going to come back to this house." And he goes to the next house and he says, "Wow, there's no deadbolts. It's just a simple key lock system. There's no pets. There's big bushes around the windows where I can sneak around and hide. And I think I'm coming back to this house." And so in some ways, the cyber criminals are doing that. And they're unconcerned in large part whether the organization or the firewall they're hacking, whether it's a whether it's a multi-billion-dollar organization or it's a mom and pop. They like easy opportunities, and unfortunately, many retailers, many small businesses, most small businesses don't have a full IT staff and a full network, a team that is aware of new strategies, new technologies to protect their organizations. And technology certainly has changed. It's certainly improved the way we protect our businesses, both at the large end of businesses, but also at the small end. I've lived in the same house for over 30 years, and we were cleaning out the attic some months ago, and we found a Johnny Cash a tape from many years ago, 8-track tape. They were indestructible. But of course, that technology is extremely outdated. And in the same way that technology has improved in regards to from an 8-track tape to, things any song you can readily download from the internet right now on your Apple device. You can just select, there's the latest song my daughter was talking about. I think I'll download that right now. And so that level of technology has also improved in regards to tools that we can use to help businesses better secure themselves from hackers. And there are organizations like the PCI Council that we'll talk about in a few minutes that are dedicated to helping businesses be more secure. So some of the tools that you should probably get familiar with that can better protect you are the PAS or PADSS certification. So you should look for software in your businesses that's PADSS certified. What that really means is that it's gone through a pretty arduous audit in regards to how it encrypts credit card numbers, how easy it is to steal information, or how easy it is to protect information. So from a software perspective, certainly that's something to look at, and we'll give you some websites to look at in just a few minutes in regards to PCI and PADSS. And then even on your desktops and your point of sales and all your laptops, it's probably wise to have current antivirus strategies running, and to make sure that those antivirus systems are updated at least daily. I think Tom mentioned something about in his earlier slide how quickly that malware was being released just out on the internet. Just every, I think Tom, you said like every 24 seconds, a machine accesses malicious code or downloads malicious information or accesses a malicious website. So every few seconds, if you're unprotected, that point of sale or just a machine in the back office in your business or out in the garden center could download something. And also on your firewalls, which is kind of the moat around your castle that is your business. There are strategies, technology strategies that detect intrusions, detect hacker-like activity, and can block it. You may want to talk to local hardware consultants to see, if the current firewalls and protection that you have in place is sufficient, or if you need to update those. A lot of customers, a lot of businesses, smaller businesses especially, are looking at cloud services and hosting your servers and your solutions in a level 4 enterprise class data center with multiple layers of protection, and just paying a monthly fee instead of having the responsibility of protecting that server on site. And really, I think when we look at the numbers over the next 5 years, I think many organizations will be looking at that for an option instead of just continuing to buy new server hardware. So that's an option. Or you might decide to have someone visit your locations and do a data security review. And a data security review is it's simply something that goes through. You know, if someone will come in your business, they'll look at passwords and they'll scan for wireless access and information, and or it can be as simple as backing up your systems, even your PCs. Think about that one PC in the controllers area that never got backed up, and it got CryptoLocker on it, and they either had to pay the hacker or they had to lose all the so new PC secure PC backup services, or you know something that we've been involved in is also securely backing up customer data offsite. It's really good in case of a fire or a natural disaster, but it's also just good business management. So there's some good tools, and one of the most exciting things I've had an opportunity to work on recently is the development of credit card number encryption and tokenization, and so you're going to see solutions across multiple industries that allow the business owner to encrypt from the time the end customer slides his card. That card number is encrypted on the pad, and so on the network or in the servers, there isn't any credit card information. It's all encrypted, and they use tokens to be able to retrieve the information. So I mentioned technology, firewall. So here's one of my rules. If you haven't replaced your firewall in about 4 years, it's time to do it. Just like that Johnny Cash 8-track tape, it was great in its day, but there are better solutions now. And hackers have changed dramatically the way they are organized to get into businesses. They are financially funded, and they are financially motivated, and so they have all the latest technology. And the good news is that in regards to firewalls, our protection against hackers, it's gotten a lot better. Things like intrusion protection or intrusion detection. So you're going to prevent hackers from getting in, and you're going to detect hacker activity. And then one of the things that we can do with firewalls today is we can block viruses and malware inbound in real time to your system. So for instance, here's a slide on current firewall capabilities. We can in current firewalls, it's easy for you to do. You can geo-block or block out whole geographic areas that you don't do business with. So this is a screenshot from an actual firewall, and you see it detected information from these different countries. If Russia was on here, I would just check that box, and it would block access to my network from anyone in Russia. Also, when we look past the firewall capabilities, just at productivity and security of your business. One of the things we see in just reviewing firewall logs is, did you know that a lot of the social media sites are heavily hacked, and so what the hackers will do is they'll hack somebody's account, and so they may embed some Trojans or some malware code in a funny video. So you get an email, and it's you click out to one of the social media sites, and you're downloading a video of something humorous, and you're thinking, well, that's pretty interesting. But what you may not know is that in the background, while you're viewing the video, you're also downloading a Trojan or a piece of malware to your system. Now the new generation of firewalls can block that threat, but if it's not blocked, it certainly can pose a risk to your organization. And so So I normally recommend that we in business environments that we filter where employees can go. So keep them focused on serving your customer and not focused on serving on the web. And here's a good example. So here's a 30-day view of Internet activity. Now this little snapshot here is based on about 5,000 endpoints across the United States. And so 5,000 endpoints across the United States, 30 days worth of data, 59 million intrusion attempts. 59 million, that's a huge number. And that covers inbound viruses and malware that were blocked in multimedia streams and things of that nature that we mentioned before. And then I have another slide coming up that talks specifically about Internet and hacking information. And so let's take the same sample size. Let's take 5,000 endpoints across the United States, 30 days worth of data, 4 million direct attacks. So, and these could be port scans or IP address spoofs or Smurf attacks or a number of different tools that hackers might use to get into businesses. And the interesting thing in these numbers is that the 5,000 endpoints are predominantly small businesses. And so it kind of points to the nature that hackers they're equal opportunity criminals. And so there are a number of technology things that you can implement. Some of them at not a great cost to help protect your business. And so one of the things that Tom mentioned earlier is it's not all about credit card numbers because again, just like Tom said, hackers are not necessarily focused on credit card numbers. They're focused on financial gain. So if they can break into your business, and they can't get credit card numbers, but they can get a list of your employees and their home addresses and all their information, or your customer list, they're happy. They're okay with that. And so in regards to just security for businesses and payment cards, there have been a lot of changes. Transformational changes in regards to the payment industry. Tom, do you want to go ahead and take this slide and talk about some of the drivers of payment change?
Yeah, sure, Harry. I had a couple. Wanted to build on what you said too. I mean, you talked about how these attackers were well financed. And I'd even go further too. If you recall, I said that most of them had PhDs. These guys are also very specialized. I mean, they run themselves as a business. So they'll have like their A, B, and C teams that all they try to do is hack in. So when you look at some of these firewall intrusion numbers you have, that's a specialized group. That's all they're trying to do is hack in. And then once they get into your system, they turn it over to another team that, their job is to now snoop around in that system and try to find the gold mines. And then if they find a gold mine, then it gets turned over to yet another team that's experts in what we call exfiltration. So they'll start mining that data, and then they'll find ways to get it off your system and back into their systems. So as Harry said, again, they're well financed. They're very specialized. This is their business. There was one number that I said about 71% of the time we're not even the ones that detect the intrusion. It's a bank or the Secret Service or something like that. There was another number I didn't show. I think off the top of my head, it's like on average these guys are in your systems for about 240 days before they're discovered. So that's what, about 3/4 of a year that they're in there just having whatever they want to do while they're in your systems.
Before they're discovered. That's before they're discovered, right, Tom?
Right. And then also PCI, and we're going to talk a little bit about PCI, but again, I think PCI is a great. I'm going to go back a slide here, Carol. I did want to talk a little bit about the payment stuff, but on PCI, which is again just the caution there is don't let someone tell you you're compliant, therefore you're okay. compliance is one thing, but secure is another issue that we should talk about. In this slide, I just, as we move to the discussion more to around protecting your payment systems, because that is the target today that they're really going after. We talked a little bit about EMV, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to stress the tokenization in P2P. Again, I made the comment earlier that, Target was spending $100 million on EMV, and it would not protect any of those credit card numbers. What retailers are doing, or what the big Tier 1 guys are doing, is they're putting in P2P encryption and tokenization. And yeah, this is an added cost, but as Harry said, that protects that data point to point, and it's never exposed on your systems at all. Therefore, that data is worthless if it's hacked. So if they were to breach in and let them steal it all they want, there's nothing they can do with it. It's encrypted. Also, where the conversation's really going, and kind of the irony of this all is we think retail is going to spend about $30+ billion on EMV, which you're going to see as a 10+ year old technology. But contactless wallets is really where the battleground is, and this is where, at last count, there were about 200 or so technology companies all wanting a piece of that pie, because they think what's going to happen is as we move to more of a mobile society and we're all carrying these mobile smartphones in our hands, that eventually that smartphone will then just replace our wallet, and therefore it becomes what we call a contactless wallet, meaning I just have it close to my payment terminal, and using radio signals here called NFC, payment information is transferred into the systems, into authorization. So the key players here, just to keep track, and we won't have a lot of time today to get too deep into them, but you've obviously heard of Apple Pay, and Apple is great, but again, just be wary of the numbers they put out. I think today I heard it was 16%. Well, it's 16% of what? It has to be an iPhone 6, so that dilutes the number. And then when you look at, well, how big of a market share does Apple have? That dilutes the number. And then when you look at, well, who are Apple's customers, right? Well, typically it's the more well-to-do folks that may or may not be your target customer. But what's happening and what we're seeing, and you can see the couple of X's I have here, ISIS, which is in the news today for another reason. ISIS was the old company that was the telecoms, the Verizon, T-Mobile's, AT&T's of the world, trying to do this wallet, and then they had to change their name to SoftCard, and then they finally gave up, and SoftCard was purchased by Google, which had Google Wallet. Well, now Google has Android Pay. So you can see how fast this stuff is moving. There's another organization, MCX, which is an organization of some of your top-tier retailers, and these guys are trying to come up with their own wallet, with the primary goal there is really to break the duopoly that Visa and MasterCard have and all the interchange fees that they're charging you. So MCX has had limited success, and we'll see how far that goes. But, when you see what's going on, just kind of watch. EMV gets the headlines, but there's lots of other stuff going on in this payment conversation. Okay, Carol?
Wow, so lots of changes in the payment industry, Tom. That's amazing. Very good information. And so, we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about PCI and what is it and how it relates to you, and then we'll talk a little bit about EMV. So first, PCI. PCI is the payment card industry, and the standard applies to you. Anybody who accepts a single, well, let's put it this way: anybody who doesn't have a sign out front that says cash only, those are the businesses that have to be concerned with PCI. So it applies to merchants, third-party providers, and to systems like software systems. And in anything that stores cardholder data, transmits or processes cardholder data, and it applies to electronic transactions or paper transactions. I remember I did a security audit for a pretty well-established web company. They had physical sites, and then each store had a little place where people could place web orders or call-in orders. And so I was just doing a security audit, and I noticed that one of their employees had processed an order very quickly from somebody over the phone, but they never asked them for credit card information. So I was concerned, is it stored somewhere on the software system that they were looking at? And so I had just asked her just casually, you did a really great job. That was good customer service. And so how did you get his card number though? And she minimized the application. She said, oh, we keep all our credit card numbers for our customers right here in this text file on our desktop. That way we can give good service. So PCI applies to card data, whether it's electronic or paper, or in this case in a text file. So moving forward, let's talk about the evolution of PCI. And as Tom mentioned, PCI has been around for a while. Matter of fact, I think next year is going to be a birthday for PCI. It'll be 10 years old next year. It was started in 2006, and PCI is the payment card industry. And something else you're going to hear a lot about in regards to security is the DSS. So the PCI is the payment card industry, and when someone says DSS, they're talking about the Data Security Standard, and that is a list of security standards that the PCI folks would love for businesses to adhere to make them more secure. But just like hackers are changing, Tom, hackers are changing the way they try to break into businesses every day, I believe, aren't they?
Well, yeah, it's a cat and mouse game that we're up against here. So as we evolve, they evolve, and then we have to evolve again. And I think you even said earlier they have the exact same, if not better, systems than we do.
And yes, and so when we look at PCI, it is evolving as well. So as new exploits come out, PCI is changing. So for instance, some of the new and the upcoming changes to PCI are in regards to devices. So DSS 3.0, they would like for you to periodically inspect the devices in your business to make sure that someone hasn't slipped behind the counter and installed a device to read customer information. And a good example of this is especially in the Midwest part of the United States, there was a group that was going around. They had a van, just a panel van, and they would pull up to a gas pump, and one of them would get out and start pumping gas, and the other one would slide the door open, and he'd get out a screwdriver, and he would ease out the payment slide that you'd slide your card in, and he would insert a device in line with a Bluetooth receiver on it to capture card numbers, and then he'd slide it back in and tighten it back up, and he'd close the van door quietly, and his accomplice would finish pumping gas, and they drive off. And so from that day forward, until it was discovered, they just had to drive into the parking lot, and via Bluetooth, and through computer systems and Bluetooth, you can connect to almost anything if you're relatively close. They were connecting to gas pumps all throughout the Midwest, and they'd drive into the parking lot, they'd connect to the gas pumps, they'd suck off the credit card numbers, debit PIN numbers, and be on their way. So PCI evolves, as it should, to try to, as Tom said, it's a cat and mouse game to try to better protect us. And so another question, if we move forward in PCI, who's responsible? So who's responsible for compliance? Well, certainly the PCI Security Standards Council. So if you'll bring up a browser and you'll just do a search for the PCI Security Standards Council, it's going to take you to a website. And I encourage all of you to do so, because even if you're not going through PCI compliance, it has a lot of good common sense security information for a business owner. So you can get videos that show you about certain risks or how to mitigate them. But overall, the Security Standards Council, they are the ones who have set the recommendations, the oversight, responsibility, requirements for businesses. So there's a special type of auditor called a QSA who can audit merchants, processors, and banks to make sure that they're adhering to those rules. Some other things just briefly about PCI before we move on. One of the things PCI is going to want you to do is they're going to want you to do a security scan of all your firewalls at all your locations periodically. That's probably good common sense these days, just to make sure that a hacker hasn't gotten in and opened up a big door, or inadvertently, someone has made a change that opened you up. And it's going to require other things like wireless technology. Wireless technology is a way in which a lot of hackers gain access to businesses over insecure wireless. But that's part of the PCI process, is looking at that. And so as Tom mentioned earlier, payments is changing a lot. And so probably all of us are going to get a new credit card this year. Probably the vast majority of us will. And those cards are going to have chips on them. And so EMV has been around for a long time. And so 1993 EMV was founded, and EMV is Europay, MasterCard, and Visa. But really what it means to you is the cards are different than the traditional cards that we've used for a long time. And so if we move forward in the EMV timeline, there are some advantages to using EMV. They can reduce fraud in regards to, in brick and mortar card present environments. So EMV can help greatly reduce, someone using just a pocket scanner. We've all been in restaurants, and we've kind of wondered, where do they take my credit card? I just had a great meal with my family, but they want to take my credit card to the back. What do they do with it between my table and wherever they take it and when they bring it back? And unfortunately, in some cases, somebody might have a scanner in their pocket. It's a little device, very small, fits easily in the pocket, and they could just, on the way back to to process your dinner, they could just scan it in their pocket, and they could do that all night and capture cards. And very, very difficult for them to do so with chip and pin or EMV cards. This has been used widely in Europe and a lot of other places, and you're going to hear a lot more about EMV in regards to 2015. But Tom's exactly right. That EMV is not in and of itself a panacea for security. And there are a lot of other things that are probably as important in protecting your business.
Right, Harry. So, it's the same as PCI. When you were talking about PCI being a common sense, I think that's the perfect line. It's common sense. It's a good starting point for securing not just your credit card data, but a lot of it's just generic about how to create better security. But again, be careful with this word compliant, because as soon as, Target was compliant when they were breached. Home Depot was compliant when they were breached. So compliance does not necessarily equate to secure. And EMV is the same way. I mean, EMV was developed, you saw that in '93. It was targeted primarily to Europe and the rest of the world to solve a problem over there, because they did not have as robust of an online authorization system as the U.S. had. And so EMV does a really good job of stopping counterfeit cards and stopping lost and stolen cards if there's a PIN on it, right? So in the U.S., basically you're going to get a chip and signature card. They're not going to require PINs. And so all we're doing is attacking the counterfeit card problem, which, as Harry just said, is not the panacea. That card is still exposed. You're still going to have a mag stripe for the foreseeable future as we over to the EMV systems. And so they'll still be able to make mag stripe cards and use them, and they'll still be able to use that card as an e-commerce transaction. So I would just take that into consideration. And again, the mandate is October 1st. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have it by October 1st. It just means that if you were to take a transaction after October 1st that turns out to be a fraudulent transaction and that card was supposed to be an EMV card, then you are responsible for that liability. So as a business, you just need to do that analysis to say, well, what is my risk to fraud, and then trans over to EMV based on that type of analysis.
You know, Tom, something you just said was risk to fraud, and you know, anytime someone's running a business, whether it's their insurance policy or a variety of issues, it's practical that every day they're balancing the risk versus the cost of protection, and so I thought that was a good statement by you. So now we're going to Tom and I are going to talk about a couple other quick things about securing your business. And then we'll open it up to a few questions. And just kind of in summary, you know, if you haven't upgraded your firewall in 4 years, probably time to do it. If you don't have antivirus, good antivirus that updates frequently on your desktops, it's certainly something you should recommend, especially if you can implement it in a way where people can't remove it. We've seen problems where someone in a back office or even at a point of sale, it's a little older PC, and they think, boy, this antivirus stuff is just slowing me down, and they uninstall it. So if you can implement it in a way where it's enforced, it's probably better. I briefly mentioned internet filtering and reporting. I think it's really important that businesses today use the internet for business. You know, we reach out to our customers. We have web-based stores that we can help people with pricing and marketing. You know, and so it's the internet's a business tool, and so I think we ought to be filtering and reporting on, you know, where are we using that internet resource. Patch updates are important. Make sure, you know, when Microsoft comes out with a patch, many times, or other organizations come out with a patch, many times these days it's because somebody got exploited and they developed a patch to fix it. So I would encourage everybody to keep up to date with their patches on the variety of things that you use. We talked a little bit about PCI DSS, and I think we covered that fairly well. Talk to your point-of-sale vendors and ask them about security. Tell them as a business owner you're concerned about credit card numbers getting exploited, and so talk to your point-of-sale company. We talked about firewall vulnerability scanning briefly. I think PCI would like for you to do it quarterly, but a lot of my customers do it monthly. It doesn't cost a lot, and it's one of those risk versus the cost of protection. It's a very low cost of protection to get your firewalls scanned. And I talked about wireless access and segmentation. One of the easiest ways hackers get into business is these days. So I think that's my summary. But Tom has some other additional really important things he wants to cover.
Yes, those are some great things you can do locally, especially with technology and all. And then I just wanted to maybe take it up a notch to the business level, and just real quick here, there's something out there called the NIST, or the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. I would strongly urge you to download that and read it, because in these breaches as we go forward, I fully anticipate that with all the lawsuits that occur around breaches, the first thing you're going to be asked is, were you following the NIST cybersecurity framework? So I would make sure I understood that. And that is a non-technical paper. It is all about how to secure your business. Harry said a great thing about, working with your providers, especially the small business, where I say understand and implement the SANS 20 critical security controls. Well, you as a small business might not be doing that, but I certainly would be making sure with my providers and my contracts with my providers that they are implementing these types of controls. Make sure you have an enterprise risk management program. I talked about that a little bit earlier, and an incident response plan, and exercise that plan. So do some role playing so that you're prepped. And this other thing, if you don't have a relationship with your local ECTF, that's Electronic Crimes Task Force. They're regional. There's one near you. I believe there's about 13 or so of them in the U.S. And or the FBI. I would highly encourage you, find out who that person is, go have lunch with them once a month, so that when something does happen, you already have that relationship established. And then if you go back to my slide on stay left of boom, and I never explained the boom, but we're going to run out of time. But just remember that slide. Go back, review that slide, look at the 8 recommendations, and follow those. With that, Carol, I think we're going to wrap, turn it over to you, and see if we've got some questions.
We do have some questions. Here's one about, there was a comment about a store keeping customer credit cards in an Excel file on the computer. For those who have customer credit card information, what is the suggested way to store the numbers?
Well, if there's a need to store the entire number, it shouldn't. The recommendation is not to store it in something that's readily accessible. So in some cases, customers may have an integrated credit card system with their point of sale vendor that can mask everything but the 4. That's pretty typical. So, like again, I talked about a restaurant. You go at a restaurant, you pay for dinner, and you get a strip, and it only shows the last 4 of your credit card number. But if from a physical perspective, I'd just be very cautious about securing like a spreadsheet that had credit card numbers. I'd want to make sure that that it's not stored on a local network that someone could get access to, and I'd want to make sure if I had it on my PC that it was that my PC was protected. Tom, you have any other suggestions?
Well, yeah, there's 2 things. It's again, our recommendation was you start looking at P2P encryption and tokenization systems, so that you were referring to the last 4 digits, where we sub that number with a token, and therefore if it's stolen, it's useless. Again, that's a service that your provider can offer. They become the token vault, and then if you need that number recovered for like a return or something like that, you submit the token back to the provider, and they come back to you with the credit card number. And then the other thing I would just, the reminder there is if you want to store it in an Excel file for whatever reason, again, PCI requires that number, if you're storing it, or what we call data at rest, that it be encrypted. So if this user is storing the number in the open, they're actually in violation of the PCI security standards.
Okay. In the garden retail world, there are Facebook, social media are big marketing tools. I mean, this is very important for mom and pop garden centers to be able to be close to their customers. And you were recommending earlier about controlling what your employees do with social media. If I didn't hear, I may have heard you incorrectly, but it almost sounds like you're saying, restrain them from doing too much social media. So how do you reconcile the need to be in social media as a local business?
Well, our generations are getting younger, and social media, mobility, smartphones, we've moved. I won't say we will be moving. We've certainly moved into generations that feed off of social media. I understand that, and many businesses have great marketing opportunities that they're able to utilize through their Facebook page. But what I recommend to customers, my customers, is that inside their store, whoever manages the marketing content for their Facebook page, they should have access to Facebook. But for just someone sitting at a point of sale, unless there's an explicit reason why you need to have access, I would block most of the main social media outlets.
What specifically should they be concerned about? What activity on Facebook? I mean, you're saying that a lot of people will get into, the common social media lines, and an employee may download something. If you're interacting with your customers, you may be looking at things that they post and that type of thing. So, what kind of activity should they be watching out for?
Facebook.
This is Sam. I think I can talk. So I think this, I think what we're trying to say on this is, in a business, it's good to use and have a Facebook page, especially in this industry. It's very well received by the customers. But there's not a reason for an employee to be on their own Facebook page conducting social media for themselves. So work-related, we're separating work-related from personal use. I think personal use needs to be done outside the business, and work-related work should be done. It should be done in the business.
Okay.
And Carol,
perfect,
I think that too. I think if you go back again to my stay left of Boom slide, number 2 is educate your employees. I mean, you've got to put a healthy sense of suspicion into these folks so that they don't click on links that don't make sense, or they don't believe the phishing email that just, if it's unbelievable, it's probably not true, right? I mean, so you've got to educate these folks. I mean, some of my larger retailers, actually it's an HR policy now. They send fake emails to them trying to get them to click on these links, and if they click on the link the first time, it's a meeting with your manager. You do it the second time, you get to meet with the CIO. You do it the third time, you're sitting in HR in your exit interview. So, I mean, that's how serious they are about, educating these employees as to the nature of the threat and trying to get them to be a little more sensitive about what they're clicking on.
So, what are some of the, let me just ask a really basic one here. What is phishing?
Oh, phishing are all those great emails. I guess the most famous one is the guy from the prince from Africa that wants to send you $20 million if you just give him a bank account. I mean, back in the old days, they were easy to see, right? Because it was so unbelievable, or it had misspellings in it and all that. But today, they're getting really good about, as an example, one of the best ones going around now is the email from the CEO who's traveling. He says, hey, so they've somehow gotten your CEO's name, which is kind of easy, right? That's usually just searching the web and seeing who the officers are or whatever. And then they craft these emails, hey, I'm traveling, I need you to wire this much money to this supplier right now, blah, 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 blah. And what AP person, my boss is telling me to do it, right? So they just, go do it. So, again, phishing is an email that's trying to get you to click on a link or go do something that's obviously fraudulent. And I tell you, they're getting really, really clever at how they do that.
Okay, it looks like we're out of time. Any questions that we weren't able to get to, we will be getting those answered afterwards. And please feel free to also email any questions you might have that you think of afterwards to clmiller@meistermedia.com. So this wraps up our webinar, and I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a great afternoon.